Hello again, I'm Stephen Wells, the host of the Motoring Weekly podcast for the Australian Historic Road and Racing community. This is episode 175. This year I've been shining a spotlight on the Australian Motor Heritage Foundation, and I've been learning about the collections of magazines, books, audio and video that they curate and provide for research and review. They are based out at Sydney Motorsport Park and hold valuable historical documents for the Australian automotive industry. Over the years, people have donated collections of artefacts, often due to bereavement, downsizing a home in later life, or simply to ensure that their collection is held for posterity so others can find the information stored in them. One of these collections is the Brian Lear Collection. In 2022, Brian Lear, well known over the last 50 plus years at hill climb and historic racing events piloting Elfins and Coopers, donated his collection, and it is certainly unique. It is housed in 47 folders and documents media articles of over 4,200 motorsport events from 1905 to 1984, and they're from all across Australia. So to find out about the collection, I interviewed Colin Piper, who has been working on curating the documents and finding links to existing information held by the Foundation. Colin's motorsport history also goes back 50-odd years when he attended Warwick Farm to watch the races, and he then worked in the press office of the Australian Automobile Racing Club at the circuit. Colin is also an accomplished musician, having had an amazing career with the Sydney Symphony Orchestra. So now, alongside reading music, Colin reads the unique Brian Lear Collection. So here's the interview with Colin. Well, this morning I am with Colin Piper back at the Australian Motor Heritage Foundation, and we're going to talk this morning about some of the work that Colin does with the foundation. So welcome, Colin. It's good to meet you.
Yes, nice to meet you.
We've got the track in the background, so there might be something happening later. Who knows if there's a bit of noise.
A bit early for them, I think, over there at the moment.
Then we might find something. Yeah. But I wanted to start, Colin, and find out a little bit more about you. So can you sort of give a brief bio of you before you got into this foundation?
Oh, yeah, well, this is only a recent thing. The last 3 or 4 years I've been coming up here to volunteer. I was a musician in my career. I was a member of the Sydney Symphony Orchestra and was always a petrol head from high school, even before that, I think. But I was always interested in motorsport. And my mum and dad used to encourage that. They used to take me to Warwick Farm in the early 60s when it first started. And eventually, when I left school, joined the Australian Automobile Racing Club. And then 1970, I met a chap called Peter Windsor, who was very involved. He just left school. And he and I became great friends, and we still are. I ended up working at the AARC up at meetings in the press office and doing things like that, whereas previously I'd always been sitting up in the members' stand. So I got a little bit more hands-on in those days. But no, it's always been a passion. I've always enjoyed it. And I particularly enjoy club motorsport, which is like the historic sports racing cars and things like that. I'm not so keen on, shall we say, motor racing as it is these days. It's not motor sport anymore, yes. I don't think.
One of the things I've noticed about talking with people from either this foundation or the Historic and Racing Sports Car Association is the link back to Warwick Farm. That clearly was something that was a prime circuit for Sydney-siders in its day.
Well, you'll be speaking to Andrew Moore, I know, at some stage, and he's the one to talk about that. He wrote a wonderful book called Aintree Down Under. And Warwick Farm was a seminal thing in Sydney. I think it was one of the great motor racing circuits in Australia. Sadly missed after it closed in 73, I think it was. And people still, all these years later, look back on the way the place was run, the people involved, Jeff Sykes and Mary and John. It was it was an amazing place. It really was.
Yeah. Well, in your bio that I read before I came in, it also talks about Formula Vees as well. Were you involved in that?
The AARC, as it was, the club that ran the Warwick Farm, they actually almost pioneered Formula V in Australia. They bought a couple of cars from Buckingham, two Notors, very early model Notors, one of which is still running around in historics. I actually drove it a few weeks ago in the parade lap for the 55th anniversary of Formula V in Australia. The guy that owns it, who I know, asked me if I'd like to drive it, because I used to drive it in 1970, 71, 72, so I had a real link with that car.
Yes.
But I used to, it was always, Peter Windsor and I used to go up of a Saturday afternoon to Warwick Farm, pull them out, the two cars out of Sid Edwards' garage, paint the tyres, make sure there was petrol and oil in them, and pump it, make sure and then spend an hour going from the two crossings down the straight through the S's and back and back and back and back. It was a great way to spend a Saturday afternoon. Our own private racing cars.
So, unlike others, you didn't come out of an automotive background. You said you were a musician.
Not in any way, no. Music was my career.
But you did have that sort of desire for motorsport, as you put it, or sort of historic racing as it is now.
As it is now, that's right.
Whereas it was motorsport in its day at the time. How did you then become involved with this foundation?
Well, after Warwick Farm closed, I still worked with the ARC in timekeeping and various things at Amaroo when they ran club meetings. And when the club folded then in the mid-80s, I totally lost interest in motor racing. I never went to any meetings. Peter Windsor was involved with the Williams team, and I went to the 1987 Australian Grand Prix in Adelaide as the guest of Williams, which was an extraordinary experience, I got to tell you. I watched the race from the pit, like in the garage, standing next to Frank Williams in his wheelchair. It was just extraordinary. But nothing, I was just not interested in motor racing. And I was conducting the Canberra Symphony Orchestra. I had a gig down there. And on my way down, this was in about 2001, I think it was, I drove down, and on the way down to Canberra, I saw a sign, historic racing at Wakefield Park this Sunday. And I had the rehearsal Friday night, Saturday, and I had the Sunday free. So I thought, so I drove back up to Wakefield Park, and that was like many years later, of course. And I joined the HSRCA on the spot. I thought, this is proper, club motor. This is what I remember and loved about it. Having the freedom to walk around the pits and all that sort of stuff. So, and then that, as far as this organisation, the AMHF goes, when Andrew published the book about Warwick Farm, I knew Andrew a little bit way back in 1970-71. He's a few years younger than I am, and he went off in his history, his academic life, and I was in my musical life. And we used to, when we caught up again, we had lunch, a cup of coffee occasionally over at Northbridge, where he lived. And Hugh was there one day, and Andrew had told me about the AMHF, and he was then in the early stages of it as well. And so, Hugh said, you might be interested in coming and having... So I came up a few times and I was helping, I thought, this is a good thing to do on Wednesday. I can't do every Wednesday, but I enjoy it very much. The company's great, the guys are good. And everyone has that, as you say, that interest in the historical, the history of motorsport in Australia. And at school, I went to the Conservatorium High School, music school. My best subject at school was history. And so I've just always had this penchant for historical things and history. And so I've enjoyed doing what I've been doing. Originally when I came here, I was helping Peter Robinson, and I can't think of a couple of other people, moving books, because there were so many books. It was the early days, trying to get them all classified into drivers, circuits, alphabetical marks and all that sort of thing. And I saw these folders, these white A4 white binders in the shelf, and they took up 2 or 3 metres, and I thought, I wonder what they are. And I pulled one out and I started looking at it, and this was the Brian Lear, who donated these 47 folders to the organisation with all these amazing archives. And I thought, you could really do something with that, because it needs to be. I think Hugh's plan is to get all this stuff on the cloud or something.
Yes.
You know, that's over my head. I'm sorry, that's beyond my. I've got no idea what they're talking about when they talk about that. But the thing is to have it accessible and to be usable. And so I sort of quietly withdrew from the moving books from one shelf to the other and thought this would be good to do. So I brought my laptop up one day and just sort of fiddled about with a system of an Excel spreadsheet to work out a way to actually modify his index a little bit. I mean, I'm being a vocational archaeologist, if you like, absolutely won't touch the fabric of the original
Yes.
archive. That won't change.
Yeah.
And his original index has remained totally intact.
Yes.
But what I've done is I've created a new index, and my index only relates to what's in the folders, because in his original index, or 250 pages, whatever it is, there are a lot of events in that index that don't actually have clippings and that in the folder. And so all my index has, it relates only to what's in the folders.
Yeah.
So if that index that I'm preparing, I say I'm up to 1953 from 1903, if that can be digitised and made available online somehow, so if you want to look up something that happened at the Mount Druitt Speedway in 1951, you can look up this index and it'll say when it was, which is the original index says that as well, the date, when it was, who put it on. But my index will also have then Sydney Morning Herald, Sydney Sun,
Right.
Adelaide Advertiser.
Yes.
You'll know where to go back to the original source
Yes.
if you want to and look.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And you spoke about Brian Lear. Not many people probably know the name Brian Lear.
Well, I certainly didn't.
So
I'd never heard of him.
can you describe who he is?
Well, I don't know him. I only met him, as I said earlier to you before we started recording. I only met him a few weeks ago down at One Raceway, we have to call it now,
Yes.
down at Goulburn. And Rod Chivas has been in touch with him a lot more than I have.
Yeah.
And I discovered that Brian was going to be at One Raceway, so I made a point of going and meeting him and seeing him and introduced myself and
Yes.
told him what I was doing. And he was a lovely guy. He was a hill climb person.
Okay.
And suffered an accident early in his life, I believe, when he lost a hand or part of a hand or something. And but he raced in hill climbs and things like that, and extraordinary guy. I mean, he's older than I am. I don't know how old he is actually, but I reckon he'd have to be late 70s, early 80s.
Yeah.
But very charming man, and this has been a passion of his. He used to come down from Newcastle, where he lives, to the Mitchell Library for Wednesday. It was Wednesday. It's an important day, and would go through old newspapers and online in Trove and all that stuff. And he's sort of, in the folders are photocopies of newspaper articles. And so we're going right back to the 1910s
Yes.
and 20s.
Yeah.
Extraordinary
Yes.
thing that he's done.
And the Mitchell Library is part of the State Library. So
Yeah,
they're
that's
holding-
correct. Yeah, the State Library. Yeah.
Yeah, so they're holding some really important documents there across a wide span of topics.
Yes, well, this would be the newspapers.
Yes.
You
Yes.
go and see the Adelaide Advertiser, the Maitland and Minor Times, and all those most weird. I mean, I've had to do which has been a real trial. SMH, a Sydney Morning Herald.
Yes.
Right, so that was simple enough. And,
Yes.
and in the early days, there were only 2 or 3 different papers, NH and Newcastle Herald. So I've, a bit like airports around the world,
Yeah.
I've got my own index for what the actual article, the newspapers are. I mean, as an example, I can tell you what. TAM is the Australian Motorist, Sydney Morning Herald, Darwin Times. It's the Referee. So that's you got to cross-reference that with this other.
Yes. So Brian, as you said, came down from Newcastle
Yeah.
to do all this research over
Yeah.
many years.
Yeah,
And
I don't
he's-
know when he started, frankly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you said that he had 47 folders.
Yeah, there are 47 A4
Yeah.
binder folders,
Yeah.
the white binder folders. That's
And
right.
they've all got these articles, photocopies of articles
Yeah.
in them.
Yes,
Yeah.
in plastic sleeves, and written on every article is like SMH, 4th or the 7th,
Yeah.
whatever. And what I've added to my index
Yes.
is that bit of
Yes.
information.
Yes.
Yeah.
So he spent, I think there were over 4,000 events.
Yeah, well, Rod Rod sort of, I don't know whether he counted it all up, but yeah, he reckons there's over 4,200 events, and his Brian's index is, what is it, 260 pages or something long.
Yeah.
And it finely printed A4 pages.
And you're saying it goes back to the really early days.
Yeah, look, I should have brought one of the earliest folder up to show you. I think the first thing is in there is about 1903.
Yeah.
There were no photographs of anything in those days, of course.
No.
But quite often, you know, they used to have the Royal Automobile Club ran a lot of events, and it's interesting, some of the names. I mean, I haven't read all the articles. Who's got that much time? But the little things about runs up to Currajong, you know, and the competition was to see how many miles per gallon you did and whether you could get up the hill, you know, and all this sort of stuff. And some of the names in there, one of them was the Hordens, and the Horden, Sam Horden, Anthony Hordens, Sam Horden was instrumental in starting Warwick Farm back in the late 50s, early 60s. So that name goes right back to the early days of motoring.
With the Horden Pavilion in Sydney.
I think it's the Royal Agricultural Showground, I
did see one little snapshot from Sydney Morning Herald, and it was the Royal Agricultural Society, and one name stood out, and that was Harry Skinner. And Horden and Skinner were instrumental in founding the Royal Automobile Club back in those days as well. And I'm always fascinated by the way that these automobile clubs around the world did these trials and tests, because clearly the car was new in those days. And what I always feel is that they've lost the plot somewhat, because today we're going into new generational cars and they don't do the same things. So you don't see, for example, here at Sydney Motorsport Park, a range of electric cars having a distance regularity where they start and they keep going until they stop, and they measure how long it's taken them to go, so the distance they've done and the time it's taken and the average speed, because that's what these guys are doing 120 years ago to prove the point, and yet that doesn't happen today.
That's interesting you say that, because I've had a similar thought. One of the things the AARC did at Warwick Farm, it was actually probably after the motor racing stopped in '73. They had Archie White was a big supporter of the AARC, and he was with Shell, and they had the thing called the Shell Mileage Marathon, where they had these tiny little cars. I mean, it was a precursor probably to that event, the solar run they do from Darwin to Adelaide. But these little cars going around the club circuit at Warwick Farm, and they had their so many cc's of petrol, and it was go, and the last one running was
the winner.
The winner, that's right, the mileage marathon.
Yeah, but that then shows to the general public, because that becomes part of their marketing, that they've got a very reliable, economical vehicle. And I think marketing in general has lost some of that fun out of it these days.
But I think it's also part of the fun that's gone out of it. You can also ascribe that to, I think, the sort of OH&S thing that goes on, and you know, I think when you mention electric cars at Sydney Motorsport Park, I thought I heard somebody say that they're not running electric cars in motorsport events because of batteries.
No, that's right. Yes.
So,
but they could do a special day where they take over the park. And
can you imagine the insurance and the loops, the hoops you'd have to go through to do that? No one would think, who's got time for that?
So you're saying that you've got to 1953.
Yeah.
How far do they go? Do they go up
they go
to
up
the
to
20s?
They go up to 1984.
Okay.
Now, the thing is, of course, that let's say pre-Second World War, a lot of that stuff is unknown. Was once you get into the 70s, 60s, 70s, there was Racing Car News, there were all the magazines, so information about motorsport events is much more accessible.
Yes.
Right? And I haven't started looking in the folders further on, and I'm seriously wondering whether I might sort of do a cut-off point at 1956 or something like that, for the time being anyway. And there are a couple of other folders there. One has personalities, and there's another, I think there's a speedway one or a motorcycle one, but I've not really got into that. And if it's taken me what, 2.5 years, 3 years to get to 1953, because it's quite time-consuming.
Yes.
It's very
Yes,
time-consuming.
especially for one day a week.
Well, yes, that's right. And I sometimes take homework home if I want to get this year finished. And,
Yes.
yeah. So, yeah. But I mean, I'm going to keep going at it. This today is. It's not relevant to your podcast, I suppose. I won't be here next week, and I'm going overseas for a couple of months then. So, I'm not going to go any further. I've finished 1953. So.
Right. Good.
But what's fascinating is the year I was born, 1947. It's funny. Oh, here we go. The day I was born, there was that on somewhere.
And you always do that. Whenever I look at something, I always flip back to see what was going on in the year of my birth.
Yes, that's right. And when Mum and Dad were born in the 20s, I said, oh, yes, when Mum was born. So, yeah.
Well, if you look at 1928 and 36, that's when my parents were born.
Yeah, mine were both born in 1922. Yeah.
Oh, and so if you get to a point, what do you see as the future of the information and your new index? How do you see that? If you're saying that Hugh would like it to go into the cloud, as it were, do you see this being put online so that people could do a search and very easily find?
You're talking to the wrong person about that.
Ask for?
I mean, yes. I mean, information. We're swamped with information these days. You can just find out anything.
Yes.
In your phone, a little device you've got there, you can find out anything. And I just sort of think that this man, Mr. Brian, has gone to all this trouble, and it's been a labour of love for him, clearly. And the index, as he finished it with the folders, is not that useful. But with the added information of where the source material came from, that is useful, because that can be found at Trove or various libraries and online. And I mean, I don't know, no one may ever look at it, but the point is, in 100 years' time, someone might.
I think somebody would. I think there will be people that will want to go back and look at the evolution of a particular event or sport or something about a vehicle, and they will come here and say, we've heard that a particular vehicle was in an event in 1931, and somebody here will go, aha, we have just the source for you.
Look it up, and you might see the results.
Yes.
And the results in this are not, it has to be said, not the official results. They're the ones that were printed in the newspaper.
Yes.
Yeah, but I can give you an example. I mean, you think back into the early 1800s, so Beethoven and Mozart, they've written all this music, and they've written it and it's been performed and it's put away somewhere. 100 years later, someone comes back and said, oh, here are the original parts from Don Giovanni. Okay, so there were changes made,
Yes. Yes.
There was always going to be someone researching and looking.
Yes. And from your own personal perspective, you've come here to help with Brian Lear's vision, as it were. What's your view on the foundation as a whole and what it's doing?
Well, I mean, it's pretty unique in one way. I mean, when you walk into this not that big building, you see the number of books and magazines downstairs. We've all got books and magazines in our homes, so you now know, okay, no one's going to want the 1970 sports car worlds. You may as well just put them in the bin, because you can get them online, and the originals are downstairs.
Yes.
Of course, the place is swamped with magazines, as you've probably seen as you walk around the place. But no, I mean, it's a repository of motoring history. That's the way I see it.
Yes.
And I don't know whether Australia, Andrew, you're going to be talking to Andrew in a while, whether Australia does history that well in some ways. We forget our past a bit. You travel to overseas, go to some of the great concert halls, the Concertgebouw or Carnegie Hall, and in the foyers up there you'll see all the great conductors, soloists that have performed, all of them. Everybody's performed at Carnegie Hall, the Beatles to everybody. And yet, you go down to the Sydney Opera House, you wouldn't know the Sydney Symphony Orchestra existed there. In the backstage areas, in the foyers and that, you wouldn't know. And there's no sense of history, and people sort of think, oh, this is the new best thing, but no, hang on, it's been here for a long time,
Well, if you look at, say, the Opera House, and it's been there for what now, 55 years?
1973 it opened.
Yeah, 73. So
Yeah.
close to 52
Yeah,
plus
yeah,
years or
yeah,
so.
50, yeah.
You would think that there would be items in there adorning every wall about what's
The
happened.
history, yeah.
Yeah.
There's a photograph down in the green room of a performance at the Choral Symphony with Ado de Vaart conducting, but there's nothing down there. There's a Brett Whiteley painting, which is under glass, and a few things from the opera and the ballet, but the SSO's part of it is it's really just this photo down the end with the orchestra and the choir on stage, and you think, well, the opening concert with Oslo in 1973, which I was in, obviously, you think that's the one that should be there.
Yes.
And I know the SSO has been the biggest hire of the hall since it opened.
Yes.
And you'd think that, maybe the chief conductors should be down there. You go to the Concertgebouw, and all the chief conductors of the Concertgebouw, there are paintings up in the gallery.
Yes.
It's beautiful.
Yeah.
But I was down in the Sydney Symphony Orchestra offices about a month ago to pick up some tickets, and went in and speaking to some friends, and they've now resurrected some of these great old pictures of all the chief conductors of the SSO in the office.
Yes.
So I think, well, that's great.
Yes.
It's
a start.
Someone can walk in there and go, so was he the chief conductor? I didn't know that. I didn't know Mackerras was the chief conductor in the 80s,
And so really, I think what the foundation is doing is streets ahead of those guys, because they've held all this information.
Yeah.
And it would be fascinating to see, for example, a presentation where people could come in, they could see the old photos and bits and pieces, and have talks about what's going on.
The talks things is good. I mean, behind you there's a couple of paintings there. I think it's the British Leyland factory, isn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, I don't think it's great art, but the thing is, they are objects that really are quite significant when you think about it.
But they're of their time. And it gives you a snapshot of what was going on.
Yeah.
Just like any of the old, painters of the 17th, 18th
That's
century.
right, yeah.
If you look at a Bruegel, you know that was his vision of that particular point in time.
Yeah.
And that's despite the fact that it looks like Morris Minors coming off
an assembly line at Leyland. That's right, yeah.
Yeah, that's what really happened.
Yeah, but see, that's the sort of thing that is automotive history. I mean, whether it's important or not, it's not for us to say, but in 100 years' time, people will go, God, did they actually do that? They lift an engine up, and now we've got an engine the size of a phone,
That's right, yes. So you're really helping to retain this history and opening it up to hopefully a new set of viewers and researchers and observers, which is good. Thank you for your time today.
It's been a pleasure, Stephen.
It's been great to meet you and learn about the Brian Lear Collection, and the fact that it didn't get wasted, didn't get thrown away, but it's actually being looked after, housed, and made more accessible for others.
And I mean, this is just one small collection here. There are other amazing collections. And baby boomers, I mean, when we're all gone, our kids and my grandkids, they'll see all this and think, what are we going to do with that? It'll be chucked.
Yes.
But at least here, there's somewhere to preserve it.
And this is how all the big libraries of the world started.
Yes. Great. Let's hear it for libraries.
That's right. Thank you, Colin.
Pleasure.
It was great to catch up with Colin's motorsport background and learn more about the Brian Lear Collection. It was quite an accomplishment for Brian to build his collection, which is now in the safe hands of the Foundation. If you would like to volunteer to help the Foundation with their curation of the documents, magazines, books and videos, head over to motorheritage.org.au/volunteer and register your interest. There is always a lot to do and they always need help. And don't forget to subscribe to the podcast through your favourite player, whether it is Apple, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Audible or Samsung, and also YouTube, to get the episodes delivered as they're published. You can also subscribe to the website, motoringweekly.com.au, and you'll also get notified when a new episode is uploaded. And you can listen to all the episodes there if you don't use a podcast app. And from this month, we also have the podcast delivered through Mixcloud, which, like Spotify, was originally designed for music and now hosts radio programs and podcasts. So if you like classic rock music, then once you've listened to Motoring Weekly, find White Rabbit Radio, which is our sister radio program. So we do classic cars and classic rock. I'm Stephen Wells, and you've listened to Motoring Weekly, the podcast for the Australian historic road and racing community.